Good afternoon. I am James Jones, Director of the Center for the Study of Diversity, and I welcome you to this year's Distinguished Diversity Lecture in Higher Education. The Center was created in 2012 with the mission of providing the scholarship that helps inform and guide diversity practices at the University of Delaware. The Center provides research and project grants to faculty and graduate students that examine a variety of diversity-related issues. We conduct surveys, focus groups, and other analytical projects that help us to understand some of the challenging issues and ways to successfully address them. We also sponsor and host conferences, symposia, and lectures that engage researchers and scholars who provide in-depth examination of a variety of diversity-related issues. The Distinguished Diversity Lecture in Higher Education is one of the features of this aspect of the center. This is the fourth lecture in this series. According to President Harker, he didn't know you were going to be in this. It takes 3 occasions to become a tradition. So that is now a center and UD tradition. Among our distinguished lecturers have been Claude Steele, currently provost at UC Berkeley, who came in 2011, Nancy Cantor, who was then president at Syracuse University and is now president at Rutgers University in Newark, the most diverse university in the United States, according to the Diversity Index from the U.S. News and World Report. And most recently in 2013, Beverly Daniel Tatum, who's president of historic Spelman College. Today's lecture continues in this distinguished tradition. In addition to the diversity lecture, today's lecture is also one of the lectures included in the Thought Leader Lecture Series sponsored by the Delaware Will Shine Strategic Planning Project that was kicked off 2 weeks ago by President Harker. Please welcome Provost Domenico Grasso, who will introduce today's speaker.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the second in the Thought Leaders Lecture Series. And as Professor Jones mentioned, and I love saying that, Professor Jones sounds like the movie, right? Raiders of the Lost Ark, Professor Jones. This is the second in the lecture series of our Thought Leaders series. Last month we had the pleasure of hearing from President Harker, who spoke on the future landscape of higher education. Today's program, as Professor Jones noted, is co-sponsored by the Delaware Will Shine Strategic Planning Initiative, the Department of Mathematical Science, the Center for the Study of Diversity, and our NSF Advance program. And it features Professor Richard Tapia, Professor of Mathematics and the Director for the Center for Excellence and Equity in Education at Rice University. Professor Tapia will present the diversity crisis in higher education, the need for new understanding and leadership. Following his presentation, Dr. Jones will lead a question and answer session with the audience. Professor Jones is, as he mentioned, Professor of Psychological and Brain Sciences and Black American Studies and the Director for the Study of Diversity here at UD. Professor Tapia was born in Los Angeles to parents who separately immigrated from Mexico in search of educational opportunities for themselves and for their progeny. The first in his family to attend college, he received his bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees from UCLA. He joined the Department of Mathematical Sciences at UCLA and then spent 2 years on the faculty at the University of Wisconsin, where he discovered that Wisconsin actually has only 2 seasons, winter and the 4th of July. He then moved to Rice University. With Tapia's efforts, Rice has received national recognition for its educational outreach programs and has become a national leader in producing women and underrepresented minority PhDs in mathematical science. President Clinton appointed Dr. Tapia to the National Science Board and recognized him with the Presidential Award for Excellence in Science, Mathematics, and Engineering Mentoring. Professor Tapia was the first Latino elected to the National Academy of Engineering. President Obama awarded Dr. Tapia the National Medal of Science, the highest honor bestowed by the U.S. government on scientists and engineers. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Dr. Richard Tapia.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I thank you for attending, okay? On the way in, I told Professor Jones, I've spoken to audiences as small as 2 and as large as 7,000, so as long as it's somewhere in between, I will be happy. So here you see crisis in higher education, the need for new leadership, new understanding. But I could have entitled this talk, My Unlikely Journey from the Barrios of Los Angeles to the White House and the National Medal of Science. So I'm going to give you my story, okay? Things I've learned, things I've done. So it's basically sort of a little snapshot of my life, and I'll put things in between that I've learned being university professor. Okay, so I'm going to talk, well, you'll see, okay, introductory statement. Are we the underrepresented minorities? And by underrepresented minorities, I mean people that basically are born in this country, okay, of, let's say, Hispanic heritage, African heritage, and Native Americans, of course. But that's such a small group today. So are we different? Do I feel that we are different? Growing up in America, we are certainly made to feel different. When I grew up in Los Angeles, I was always made to feel different. We're treated differently, and in many ways, people have lower expectation of us. Now, my struggle for identity, one thing about being an underrepresented minority in this country, Hispanic American, African American, is a struggle for identity. Who am I? Where do I belong? Those issues. So there's an identity crisis in that sense, especially if you're good in science, in engineering or mathematics. And that's what happened to me. Now, my struggle for identity. In the United States, I was always called Mexican, okay? Where I grew up, oh, Mexican. That's fine. So we went to Mexico. My mother said, we're going to visit Mexico. And there I was called gringo, okay? So where do I belong? Mexican here, gringo over there. Neither country wanted to claim me, okay? So, but I'm here. So in Los Angeles, there was a negative image with the term Mexican American. Your kind is not quality. You don't belong to quality activity. And that was along the way implicit with counselors and teachers. But my mother, the proudest person in the world, be proud of who you are. But Mom, they won't let me be proud. They won't let me be proud. And she said, well, be proud anyway. But it would get worse. Enter the foreign Latino, the person who came from whatever, Spain, Argentina, Colombia, all these things. So as I grew up, I would have these people tell me, how sad, you're neither Mexican nor American. You have no real culture. You do not know Latin American literature, and you don't speak Spanish correctly, okay? What did I learn? You don't speak Spanish in front of these people because you'll be corrected and criticized. I would say I am Mexican American, and as such, I'm fortunate to be able to choose the best of 2 worlds, Mexican American. I can contrast. There's a great composer named Jose Alfredo Jimenez out of Mexico. I can contrast the great Jose Alfredo Jimenez with Hank Williams, the great American composer. Lola Beltran, the great singer, with Patsy Cline. Ah, you say that you don't know who Hank Williams and Patsy Cline are. Isn't that sad? You know so little about the country that you live in, that you teach, and that you expect to mentor in. Okay? I know more about your country than you know about the country you live in. So that's my defense. So that would always upset these people, which was my intention, okay? That's called defense mechanisms. Look at the bottom line. I am American, I am cars, I'm rock and roll. So issues related to race that annoy me. When I hear sportscasters in the United States mispronounce the fact that the Spanish Z is an S, okay? So when you hear Diaz or Perez or Martinez, okay? It's Martinez, it's Perez, and it's Diaz, okay? That always bothers me. One simple rule, Z is an S, okay? That bothers me. Now, in the elevator in Terminal C in Houston's George Bush Airport, the person that speaks Spanish has terrible accent. Terrible accent. And I wonder if they do that on purpose just to remind us that, you know, that maybe we don't really belong, okay? Another thing that's always bothered me is we Mexicans are not good enough to play ourselves in the movies or on TV. The original Pancho Villa was Wallace Berry, a white person, okay? Zorro, Guy Williams, white. Chico and the Man was Freddie Prinze. At least he's Puerto Rican, New Yorican. Richie Valens, Lou Diamond Phillips, Filipino. The Milagro Beanfield Award were terrible. Okay, Redford should be shot. Sonia Braha, Brazilian, beautiful woman, but not Mexican or not Mexican-American. Selena, Jennifer Lopez, another New Yorican, okay? In the latest movie, Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, who played a strong role, in Huelga, I mean, in the 60s, 50s, it was played by Rosario Dawson, who's wonderful, but again, she's New Yorican. So those things annoyed me. Can't we be ourselves? Can't we play ourselves? That's part of the pride. But issues that related to race that really bothered me, when I was in high school, now the high school I went to was not predominantly Hispanic. It was predominantly poor white, but I happened to be Hispanic in this poor white school. The American Master Society said, we're going to have a contest, and the principal said, whoever wins this contest, we will have an award, a ceremony in front of everybody and present this award. I said, that sounds great. So I won the award. I got the highest in the school. And the principal came to me and said, we're not going to have an assembly. Here's the award. Thank you. Okay? Now, that even bothers me to this day. Why did they do that? Now, at UCLA, when I was an undergraduate, an astronomy professor said to me, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to go to graduate school. I don't think you should go to graduate school. Don't worry about it, okay? Rental house in Madison. When we went to Madison, Wisconsin, that was my first position, faculty position. We had rented a house, and my wife, son, and daughter and I went to Madison. Wonderful. But when we got there, the person who was renting us the house took it away. He found out that we were Hispanic, and he didn't want to rent to Hispanic. So we got there with no house, okay? They were very embarrassed. So eventually we found a house. Now the neighbors, my late daughter, Cersei, okay, my wife's New Yorican, Puerto Rican, I'm Mexican-American. One day she came to me and she said, Dad, am I black? Cersei, no, you're not black. Why do you ask? Well, the neighbor keeps saying, we don't want you black kids around here. And I said, but this is Madison, Wisconsin. They don't know what Mexicans are, okay? So they think you're black, okay? Don't worry about it. Now, many years ago, one of my best friends was the chair of our department. And on the first day of school, we had an assembly, and the faculty and the graduate students were there. And he came in and said to people, here's what's happened, and here's what's happening in the department. And then he said, Richard Tapia continues to win every minority award in the country. But the awards that I value and are very prestigious was won by A or B or C. Now, I knew that that was kind of true, but he didn't have to bring it up in that manner, okay? So remember, I would win minority awards, all of them. That's going to come back. Who am I, okay? So that's a question you always have to ask. Who am I? Words that I identify that make me happy. I like the word Chicano. I grew up in Los Angeles at a time when Chicano was a good. About the time that Negro became black, and black is real, the word Latino, Hispanic came Chicano. So it was a sign, middle 60s. I like it. Tejano. Selena made the word Tejano, which just means Texan in Spanish, a very proud word. I like that. Mathematician. I am proud to be a mathematician. It's a warm feeling, even though many people don't say, how could that be? I love being a mathematician. So those are three words that I identify with. That's how I think I look, okay? This is the cover of Sakna's News, and it got to the White House, and I got a note from Bill Clinton saying that he enjoyed the picture, but he was looking for the centerfold and he couldn't find it, okay? My culture is American. My mother and father are Mexican. Beautiful. En el fondo del corazón, in the bottom of my heart, I identify with that heritage. I love it. But I'm a product of the United States, so my culture is American. Perhaps with a twist. American culture, you're too young to understand this, but here's the legendary backseat of a 57 Chevy. That's my wife, that's me, okay? And that was an important component in social activity in those days, okay? But what are you going to learn from this? What's the beer I'm drinking? What, anybody want to say? It's Tecate. See, if I was drinking a Corona, I'd be a poser, okay? Tecate is the beer of the working Mexican class, okay? Tecate con limón, okay? Corona, you might as well say, oh, man, he doesn't understand, okay? So, my story. My parents were from Mexico. They came in search of education. I went to community college. I had two professors in community college direct me to UCLA. I went to UCLA, and Dave Sanchez, who was on the faculty at UCLA, directed me into the professorate. Now, one of the things that I see about us minorities in particular, is we're monotone increasing. You know, we get better with age, just like wine, okay? And we do many things. When I was at NPR, when I won the National Medal of Science, Michelle Martin told me, I hate interviewing mathematicians. That's my worst. But you've been very interesting, and I like it, and we had a good time, okay? My parents, what did I learn that I go back and reflect on? Incredible pride. My mother was the proudest woman in the world, even though people didn't want to let her be proud, she was. My mother always believed, yes, you can. Sí se puede. Good work habits and this global excellence. My mother's standards were such that it wasn't good for the family alone or the neighborhood alone. It was good across a global board. I didn't realize that, but I realize it now, okay? So those were the things that I remember today strong. The hardest working and the proudest person. And I have a brother that went to Yale, and I have a sister who went to Stanford, and I went to UCLA, and my other brother went to UCLA. And these were from parents who didn't graduate from high school. They just instilled in us that belief in education. So my twin brother Bobby, I grew up in California racing cars, and Bobby, in 1968, in a field dragster, set the world record. So Bobby set the world record for field dragster, okay? Not the local record, not the LA record, not the California record, the world record. What did that mean? Global excellence, okay? And so Bobby and I realized that at the time. Now my wife Jean and I built a show car in 2005. It's called Heavy Metal, 3 times national champion. And this is the car, okay? It's a 1970 Chevelle Malibu SS, 3 times national champion. So what does that mean? There's my wife. This is in Fresno, California. She's in the wheelchair. I'm pushing her. And that's our Chevelle, who took first place. Global excellence. I didn't want people to say, that's really a nice car for a professor, for a mathematician. I want to say, that's a nice car, period. That's the finest car, period, okay? I didn't realize it, but that was the global standards that my mother kept teaching us. So now let's go back into what do we Latinos do better than any other ethnic group? Well, we produce extremely well, okay? We're very, very good at it. So here's a profile of our great nation. And if you really just don't look at the numbers because we don't need that. I'm going to summarize them on the next transparency. What we see is that the white population in the United States is declining 4% per decade. The Hispanic is increasing 4% per decade, okay? Now, African American is staying constant. Asian is increasing. So if you do linear extrapolation, which you shouldn't do, but just take a line and you'll see that in 160 years there'll be no more whites, okay? All gone, okay? And Hispanics will be 80% of the population, okay? Now, it's not going to go down to 0, and I have had people be very upset when I say that, okay? But it's kind of a joke. But the trend is there, okay? The trend is there. As the decrease in white, the increase in Hispanic. This is extremely important, okay? The Browning of America. The Pew Hispanic Center at Harvard announced that in 2011, the Mexican-American boom. For the first time in history, births overtake immigration. See, you know what that means? Is that we as a nation, we're strong, we're healthy. We're producing our own Mexicans. We don't have to bring them in from Mexico anymore, okay? So this is, something that rejoice. We don't have to worry about the border. So if Obama closes the border, we still have our own Mexicans, okay? Now, why are we producing at such a rate? Look at the red box. And the yellow is Texas, the red box is the country. Look at the green box. If you're not Hispanic and you die, 1.5 will replace you. If you're Hispanic in this country and die, 8.5 will replace you. It's a very young population that's exploding, okay? So there's an explanation. It's a very, very young population. So what do we Latinos do better than any other ethnic group? Also, we drop out of high school. We're very good at it, okay? So let's look at this and read this. From the New York Times. In New York, Mexicans lag in education. In the past 2 decades, the Mexican population in New York City has grown more than 5-fold, with immigrants settling across the 5 boroughs. Many adults have demonstrated remarkable success at finding work, filling restaurant kitchens and construction sites, but their children, in one crucial respect, have fared far differently. About 41% of all Mexicans between the ages of 16 and 19 in the city have dropped out of high school, 41%. No other major immigrant group has dropped out at a rate higher than 20%, and the overall rate for the city is less than 9%. The problem is especially unsettling because Mexicans are the fastest growing major immigrant in the city. So look at a nation. The dominant group, Mexican, Hispanic, a group that drops out of high school. How can you be represented in science, engineering, in academic issues if you don't even finish high school? A critical issue. In Houston, Texas, the dropout rate for Hispanic males is 60%. 60%. Okay? That's a critical issue. That's a critical issue. Okay, what do blacks do better than anybody else? They go to high school and no more. Blacks graduate out of high school at a reasonably high rate, but no college. Blacks and browns strongly avoid STEM areas in favor of things like sociology. Asians go into STEM areas as workers, not as administrators or other national leaders. So look, Asians are very good, Asian Americans, at getting their degrees and becoming workers. But we don't find Asian American administrators as presidents of universities and provosts of universities across the country. So their culture doesn't direct them towards the leadership positions in STEM, towards the workforce. The Hispanic doesn't direct them either towards the leadership or the workforce. Crisis. We'll get to that slide. So look, this says the top 100 departments, universities across the country, representation. So in math, if you see, just look at the yellow things. Less than 2% are black of the math faculty at the top 100 schools. Less than 2% are Hispanic, but 17% are Asian. Okay, that combines Asian American and foreign Asian. Okay. In computer science, less than 1% black, less than 2% Hispanic, 27% Asian. Electrical engineering, 1.7% black, 1.7% Hispanic, 28% Asian. That's not to deny them, that's to complement them. They're there. So a statement that has been picked up by some of the people in Houston, but we are here. We Hispanics are here, but we're not there. We're not in positions of leadership. We're not in positions of being professors. We're here, and we're not going away, but we're not there. Critical concern. Okay, so where do we get our PhDs? Hispanics, this is all PhD productivity in the country, okay? Hispanics, the not large numbers, but the top is civil engineering and sociology. That's where Hispanics get their PhDs. What about African Americans? Well, it's basically sociology and political science, okay? What about females? It's sociology and psychology. What about white males? Everything but sociology. What about Asians? Electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, computer science, okay? There are good jobs in the country. We know that. But we, the underrepresented minority, tend not to train in the areas where there are jobs. That's a critical concern, okay? You saw the discipline in which most blacks get PhDs is sociology, okay? Fine, I'm not against it. But what about those disciplines that have made the history of this country so strong in terms of our scientific creativity, the nation? Historically, white people, I use that in a very friendly way, have done a great job as STEM workers and leaders. For years, we, the United States, have been the envy of the scientific world, and we still are in graduate education. As our nation becomes brown and yellow, will our scientific workforce and scientific leadership be replenished? That's the question we have to ask. Or will historians write about the rise and fall of the United States? The rise and fall. See? So you see the pattern that I'm presenting. We're exploding in the population, but we don't earn degrees in STEM areas, in fact, were below the data that shows from maybe 20, 30 years ago. So why worry about underrepresentation? Our representation in the population is exploding. Our representation in STEM discipline is not. So it's an unhealthy national situation. I just said that. Our concern with STEM underrepresentation today does not come from moral or ethical issues as it did in the 60s. In the 60s, when we started affirmative action, we denied a certain group, two groups, access to public education. We denied the African Americans. In certain states, and particularly in Texas, we denied the Hispanic Americans, the Mexican Americans, okay? So we started to implement programs in the 60s in affirmative action to compensate for our sins, if you wish, the things that we did, that we denied access, okay? Now, today, on the other hand, okay, it's not a matter of alleviating guilt feelings. It's a matter of the survival of the nation. It's not who suffered more, African Americans or Hispanics. The African Americans did. I'll give that to you right away. But if it's an issue of numbers, if you don't think about what's happening with the Hispanics, then the country is going to be in danger. So we don't argue who suffered more. We argue what group needs to be looked at for the safe well-being of the country. Okay? So underrepresentation endangers the health of the nation, not the health of the discipline. I will argue that mathematics is alive, it's well, and it's not going to be better because in a group there was a black, a brown, a woman, and a white. Okay? That type of diversity is not what we need in terms of saving disciplines. It's what we need in terms of saving the country. So look, 4 factors that I want to identify in underrepresentation. Now, I make a distinction between diversity and underrepresentation. I'm talking about groups that are traditionally underrepresented. So here's what I say. I would like to touch on faulty evaluation by mathematicians, the mismatch theory, the role of foreign minorities, and the loss of the precious few. I'll try to go fast. Math evaluation at every school I visit, it doesn't matter what I visit, but I visit a lot of schools, it's a major obstacle in improving representation for minorities. Mathematicians are self-proclaimed gatekeepers of quality. It doesn't matter what school it is, okay? Now, we underrepresented minorities have poor preparations at all levels. Now, mathematics faculty do not differentiate between poor preparation and poor talent. So in entry-level courses, they interpret poor performance as poor talent and discourage the underrepresented minority from continuing in STEM disciplines. And see great migration patterns across almost all universities who start, that is, minorities who start in science and engineering and move to the other side of campus. The faculty should be blamed for not doing their share of dealing with this problem. Now, a story that I will tell you. I thought about whether I should tell you this, but at Rice we have the department I'm in, applied math, and then we have a traditional pure math department, okay, the cleanest and the purest of the pure, okay? And so they teach some really good classes. So a few years back, I sent 5 students from my program to take a class from a very famous mathematician in the math department, a functional analysis class, a graduate class. 5. Now, 4 were white, 1 was minority, 1 was Mexican American, okay? And the professor didn't ask them to do anything. No reading, no writing, no presentations, no nothing. Just listen to him. And at the end, we found out when the grades came back, he gave 4 A's and 1 C, okay? The minority got a C. So when we were preparing his dossier to go do a postdoc at NYU, we saw the C. And so I started making a big fuss with the president, with the provost, with everybody. And finally, when I got to the professor, his only explanation was, I try to discourage those that don't belong in mathematics. Okay? Lower expectation. How did he know he didn't belong in mathematics? Just the way he looked. Isn't that terrible? Isn't that terrible? Isn't that terrible? Yes. Okay? Lower expectations. In other words, he felt his experience had taught him that minorities don't belong in math. So I decided to prepare this slide for you. According to at least one Rice mathematician, one of the following does not belong in mathematics, okay? How do faculty view underrepresented minority graduate students? So in some of the programs that I have, I did a survey. I asked faculty as we bring in summer research programs. And look, let's just look at the bottom one. This was the faculty views of underrepresented minority students. 6% said, yes, minorities have talent in the field of study. That means 94% didn't believe they had talent. Lower expectations. That's what it is. So today's racism is not denied access, it's lower expectations. Okay? Okay. So these were the 4 things I was going to talk about, and I want to, we already talked about faulty evaluation. The mismatch theory is a theory that was sort of produced at UCLA by Saunders Elliott, law professor. And he says, look, affirmative action at research schools hurts the underrepresented minority they're trying to help. They do not succeed in STEM and should therefore be directed to minority-serving institutions where they can succeed, i.e., minorities go to minority schools, majorities go to majority schools. Now, his data may be valid, but it's an incorrect conclusion. You have to build support programs so that students that have preparation deficiencies can succeed at these schools, because we need representation from the full spectrum of universities. That's what I've done at Rice, is build support programs, okay? Okay, I don't want to go into this in detail, but I have an op-ed article in the Chronicle of Higher Education, and it's true diversity doesn't come from abroad. The distinction between the need for us to deal with minorities, underrepresentation, are those domestic that were born in this country. So if you said, look, we're dealing with underrepresentation, we hired somebody from Colombia, or somebody from Argentina, or whatever, you're not dealing with the problem, you're actually exacerbating the problem. So I've resigned from advisory committees because the administration won't accept there's a difference between the foreign minority and the domestic minority. There's a lot of difference. A lot of people, for example, I could talk about mathematicians that were raised in Argentina, went to the best schools, came to graduate school at Princeton, and then were on the job market with someone like Richard Tapia, poor high school, community college, and we have to compete for the same job. We don't have the same preparation. It's unfair. So that's a major issue, understanding the distinction between trying to improve the representation of domestic versus so-called foreign minorities. I like that this country brings the best minds in the world. I love that. But we can't let it step on the toes of improving underrepresentation. We can't do that. And yet there are universities that I will not name because I'm being filmed, but that do it really quite well. Today's research universities are very diverse in terms of faculty and undergraduate students. They continue to do what they've always done well. However, representation of members from underrepresented groups is non-existent. Diversity steps on the toes of underrepresentation in the way it's interpreted. Okay? The loss of the precious few. So what happens in minority-serving institutions, the student is comfortable and does well and has self-esteem, but lacks the preparation to do graduate school at a Tier 1 school. So they're lost to research science forever. Now, at Tier 1 schools, let's talk about Rice. The minority students who are accustomed to functioning with self-confidence encounter sink or swim culture and no support mechanisms at the Tier 1 school. So what they do, feeling beat up and losing confidence, they either migrate to non-STEM majors. That's very common, the other side of the campus, okay? Or they continue in STEM, but avoid graduate school at all costs. So we lose them to research, so they're lost to research science. So I'm giving you a situation that minority schools contribute to the loss of research science, and majority schools do too, a problem that has to be addressed, okay? Rice graduates 91% of its athletes, okay? You say, yeah, but you don't win games. Okay, all right. But we're winning, okay? But not in intended major. Not in intended major. We graduate 90% of underrepresented minorities. It's one of the highest in the country. So they get their degrees, but not in intended major. They wanted to be in electrical engineering, and they graduate in political science, okay? So we're bringing them away. Most problematic transition point for underrepresented minorities at research university is faculty hiring. I say being accepted at the undergraduate level, yeah, maybe some problems. Graduate, maybe some problems. Faculty hiring in math departments and other STEM departments, that's the biggest problem. Okay, so let's go and follow that a bit. So our extra dimensions are not valued at hiring. They're not even frosting on the cake. They are the box that the cake came in, and it's thrown away. Yet they're needed. They're needed. So faculty hiring, the narrow view. Why I would not be hired by Berkeley Math Department, okay? I can share this with you, okay? I gave this talk to the Berkeley Math Department, and it was a success. It was a success because it started fights, okay? So I have insufficient research potential at an early age to be awarded a Fields Medal. That's the Nobel Prize in Mathematics, okay? Many successful hires can't teach, can't talk to students, can't mentor, do not serve as role models, don't care about the national picture, don't care about students, and can barely find their way to their office, okay? But they've been deemed as having sufficient potential to win a Fields Medal. The field view, the full view. I would give in all standard components and beyond. My contributions would be valued. I would be promoted. I would be tenured. But I wouldn't be hired. I'm talking about Berkeley and Stanford. But you have to interpolate in between. That means that there's a whole spectrum of, okay, maybe it's not Berkeley, but it's the same issue about hiring minorities into STEM positions at good universities. Now, in 1976, Stanford administration wanted to hire me. But the mistake was they led the fight themselves as opposed to letting the department lead the fight. So the department said, we're not going to let administration. And I did some things wrong. I taught 3 classes at Stanford in 1 year, and I had perfect teaching evaluations in all 3. I was faculty advisor to all Hispanic student groups, including medical and law. So Stanford made me an offer, but it was far below what I could accept, so I had to reject it. And I did, so I rejected the offer from Stanford, okay? My extra dimensions in what I was doing were of negative value to the department. Now, at both Berkeley and Stanford, here's the Pied Piper effect. Now, the Pied Piper with the food, that's me. Now, there's an insert of my wife in a wheelchair, okay? And these people following are students. Everywhere I went at Stanford or Berkeley, the students followed. We want to be with you. But the next talk doesn't have to do with students. We want to be with you. Black, Hispanic, Asian American. Everywhere we went, okay? And yet, in 1992, I was the first Hispanic elected to the National Academy of Engineering. But there's more. So in 2011, I won the National Medal of Science. Of course, the first Hispanic. I never dreamed that I would win the National Medal of Science, okay? Now, many things happened there, but one of the things is that I closed my eyes and I said, Mom, thank you. My mother was no longer alive. Thank you, Mom, for teaching me global excellence. Okay? This is the highest you can go. This is the highest honor given in the United States by the United States government. And so I looked at my wife, Jean, of more than 50 years, and I said, guess what, Jean? We won a White Award. You have to understand that. Because all my life I've been told, compromised. Yes, but that's a Hispanic award. Yes, but that's a minority award. Jean, we won the nation's highest White Award. Isn't that great? Yes, she said. Do I belong? These are you who are mathematicians. These are legendary people who have won National Medal of Science. I mean, Kurt Gödel, John Tukey, Norbert Wiener, just on, my heroes. How can I belong with that group? They were my heroes. I don't belong there. My wife and I used to have fights and discussions about could I ever win the National Medal of Science. And I said, no. And she said, Richard, you're good. Gene, you don't know these other people. So do I belong? So President Obama came out. And then he called me by name. And he said, 7 of you have done outstanding research. But one of you, Richard Tapia, has given to this nation in directions that are critical to the future of the country. In terms of dealing with underrepresentation, gender equity, Richard Tapia has been a model for scientists. And I wish the other 6 of you would emulate what he has done. So I said, again, I closed my eyes. Thank you, President Obama, for convincing me that I belong here. But there's more. Then this year, I guess, I won the very prestigious NSF Vannevar Bush Award, the first Latino ever to win this award. This is National Science Foundation's highest award. But remember, I wouldn't be hired by Berkeley Math or Stanford. The guiding themes in my life: I'm not the best. I've never been the best. I always have colleagues that are better in the sense of traditional evaluation like intelligence. But I'm good enough. I've never doubted that I was maybe not good enough. I didn't feel I couldn't do it. My mother taught me, not that I was the best, but you can. Sí se puede. Okay, you can do it. So I lived my life like this. If you sit on the porch with the big dogs and occasionally bark like a big dog, the world will view you as a big dog. Okay, so all I had to do was learn to bark and pick the proper friends. Okay? So message to students: your credentials precede you. They promote credibility and open doors. People, when I'm invited to give talks, they say, well, look, we may not like what he says, but he can't be a total turkey who won the National Medal of Science. Okay? Be a professional who happens to be a minority, not a professional minority. Okay? We serve as role models in 2 capacities. So I am a role model to minority youth and the minority community, yes. But even more important, I'm a role model to majority on committees, like one of the National Science Board. I am a role model to these majority people that are saying, excellence comes in many flavors. Richard Tapia was a great member of the National Science Board. Therefore, people like him will be great members of the National Science Board. Excellence comes in many flavors. And that's critical when you're the only one. Now, we're just going to skip all these. I think I like to stay this one. UCLA and Berkeley in math have few minority undergraduate majors, essentially no graduate majors, and no minority faculty. Yet California has the largest minority population in the country. If a public flagship university is not responsive to the needs of the state, then both state and national funding should be cut. That's what I say. How about other public schools? How about other private universities? Okay. We're going to jump forward because I want to stop at that point. But basically, thank you means that's the end of my talk. Okay. Sir? Yes.
I think of this as my meet the press moment. Thank you, Dr. Tapia, for sharing your story. I know you're big on stories, for frankly and forthrightly talking about some of the issues and framing it in a way that allows us to get beyond what we might think of as ethical or moral obligations, but to talk about the fundamental principles of excellence and the principles of necessity that make underrepresentation an issue that needs to be examined very carefully and very forthrightly. So I really appreciate that, appreciate your story. You're a very interesting person, I'm sure everyone would agree. I'm going to open up for questions, but I have about 5 or 6 questions, but I can't ask them all because you're here and I think you probably have your own questions, which I think is what this should really be about. But we had lunch today and we talked about a number of issues, and one of the things that really struck me that we talked about, Dr. Tapia runs many programs at Rice University that are very dynamic, and as I listened, I was very interested in how he goes about creating the kind of energy and synergies that he talked about. You talked about community, as a critical factor in helping students feel connected to your programs at Rice and to the university in general. Could you say a few words about how you create community and how students respond to it,
Sure.
and how the institution is able to be part of that process?
Community to me means dealing with the underrepresented minority students, let's say graduate education, from all departments, not just mine, but pulling it together and supporting each other. We listen to each other, we discuss things. But if I have a speaker, let's say I have a lecture series called, it's a lecture series for underrepresented minority speakers. So it's President's lecture series of diverse scholars. I have the students help me host the speaker. Like Freeman Murbowski was one. Recently we had Sonia Nazario from Enrique Journey. So I bring the students in saying, you're doing an important thing. You're really showing these students what Rice is about. You're welcoming the host. You're working together. So when I need something done like that, they help it. But we also meet and we talk about the issues of how we can help each other as needed, and turn to each other and then turn to the faculty. Sometimes we'll do things in the community, and I try to get them to do things, but not too much. So I want them to believe, one, I'm an important part of this, this university. We're an important part. And that, we belong. So I build a community. Now, we have social activities. Okay. For example, recently I was, I won the Houston Mayor's Award for Hispanic, whatever it is, Hispanic Heritage Citizen of the Year. And we had a reception at the Museum of Fine Arts. And I had all the students there. I said, I want you to come, and you're going to be my extended family. And they were there, and they were all there. They were a part of it. And they were here, and they were there, and they were visible. So they're a part of a community that I built. Sometimes my daughter's birthday parties, Becky's birthday, used to be a big event, and we would all come. So I just try to do things and give them opportunities to do things that they feel good about. Opportunities to excel, opportunities to succeed. And then I'll have the president or somebody come by and say, you're really an important part of this university. And my students will come and welcome the freshmen, the minority student freshmen. And so it's just a community of an extended family and making them all feel that they belong. And confidence. I mean, I maintain if you had to have two things to keep people successful, I belong and confidence. That's what that's what we teach.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very, very good principles, I think, for everything that we do. We only have about 10 more minutes, so I want to open it up for, I have more questions, but I would like to invite you to pose your questions to Dr. Tapia.
Yeah. See, you're thinking.
Raise your hand. We have
okay.
Mics, and feel free.
You're thinking a question, so why don't you just share it?
There's one right here.
Hi, Dr. Tapia.
Yeah.
Actually, well, I'm trying not to get emotional. You having thank you up on that sign is, I wanted to say to you personally, thank you, and I'm happy to be able to say it here at the University of Delaware. I was a graduate student for many years in computer science, and I got outside funding to go to the Grace Hopper Conference in 2004. And the reason why I want to say thank you to you is because of your former students, of just the work that you do, the endless work that you do for people. I don't always think people here on this campus understand. You are able to say things that I can't. Mm-hmm. You said things today that I said since I got here that goes on deaf ears. So I say thank you. I'm trying to go back to the story of what happened when I went to Grace Hopper. I met your students. Some of your students came up to me and they're like, oh, and start talking about you and start talking about the Tapia conference. And going to that conference, what happened to me is I knew only one other person that was African American in computer science in the country at the time. And the only reason I knew this other person in graduate school was they just happened to be my roommate from undergraduate school when I was an undergrad. And just to meet people with PhDs that spoke like me, looked like me, believed in me, was just phenomenal. And I say that because I was ready that year to pack up and leave Delaware because I couldn't take it anymore. And I can remember when I went to other conferences, your students would come up to me and be like, how are you doing? They reached out to me. So I'm happy to be able to say that here with people so they can understand. I don't really think University of Delaware knew who they brought here today, just so they can understand your impact. Another real quick story that I have is recently I was at another conference this summer.
Could I just interrupt? Because we want to give other people a chance.
Okay, sure.
I think you've made a very poignant and
But
important
thank
point,
you.
but let me-
Thank you very much. And you did go to the Tapia conference?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. It's a great conference. Everybody should go. Yeah.
It's in Boston next year, isn't it?
It's in Boston in February. Last year it was in Seattle. But it is a great conference for students. I mean, I'm being objective. It's a great conference for students. Okay.
There we go. Another question.
So how do you distinguish between lack of preparation and lack of talent from your experience?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Okay. I do it by dealing with the student. Okay. And I had a student recently that did really poorly in one class, and I said, well, what's your preparation on this and this and this? And I even will ask them questions and stuff like that. And I can tell just from my experience that basically they come from a situation where they weren't prepared at the level that they should have been. They come from, it's unfortunate that schools which are predominantly minority, high school, public schools, okay, this student may be the best out of that school, but is not on par with a lot of the students that come to Rice. So I do it by dealing with the individual student and then counseling them. And I have one-on-one mentoring programs where a faculty person will deal with the student and then try to determine what's the best solution we can do. And sometimes it's to take another course or to do something. But I talk to the student, and then I take it from there. But, we have to deal with it. I said, do you realize, where you are on these issues? Okay, so I do it by taking personal attention or having one of my other faculty colleagues take personal attention and dealing with the student, okay? And you can tell. You can tell. And then tell them, look, you do have talent, but you've gotten a bit in over your head, so let's try to fix that. That's what I did with myself at UCLA. I was in over my head at UCLA, okay? But there was nobody to help me, so I helped myself.
Question. In the back, and you're next.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your address and your comments. And we're looking at math and the gatekeeping that happens in R1 institutions and graduate school.
Yep.
There was a very, very compelling article about LaGuardia Community College in the New York Times a few weeks ago, talking about math as gatekeeping in community colleges, and that students were not able to make progress because they were failing a math class that wasn't even, it's a math class they had to take before they could really matriculate, So do you have some comments about this fixation with math and how it still is used on many levels to limit the participation of working class, poor, and students of color?
I mean, it is a problem. I mean, my colleagues, okay, all colleagues, they think they understand every issue, and that is, if you can't do math, they don't understand the issue of not being prepared. And most universities aren't going to spend the money to build programs that will prepare the students. We do at Rice. Rice pays for a bridge program in the summer before they take math, physics, and chemistry, and we teach in those areas. And the university pays for it, and it's expensive. You have to be willing to admit. See, the sink or swim mentality of mathematicians is, okay, I'm not going to worry about why they're not there, but they're not, and therefore they shouldn't be in math, okay? So we have to, as universities, reach. You can't say, let K-12 take care of it, okay? That's what most university people are going to say. It's not our problem, it's a K-12 problem, okay? But I say the loss of the precious few. If you don't take care of the ones that are coming in and deal with them, then we're really in bad shape, okay? And the university has to make a commitment to deal with those students. And Rice has. We have. And it's open to not just minority students, to anybody who feels they have bad preparation. But I've seen it everywhere. And that's why I'm saying, while you say that's a problem with respect to the students, notice in my talk I said faculty hiring in math departments is the most problematic. It's the most problematic. In the entire University of California system, 9 campuses, how many African American mathematicians on the faculties? 0. How many Mexican American or Hispanic American? 1. So those are problems that have to be dealt with by an administration that wants to deal with them. Okay? If the administration doesn't want to deal with them, then you're swimming upstream and you may as well go do something else. Okay?
Hello, I'm taking a human diversity and family studies class, and we were talking about like how you said the rate of Mexican and Latinos dropouts, and they said that they believed it had a lot to do with familism, which is like the strong sense of family that they have, so they feel like they have to drop out to support the family, and I just wanted to see what you thought about that.
Well, I think there's a small amount of truth in that, but that's not the majority. That's not the majority. And there's a certain amount, but that's not going to account for the big bulk of it, okay? The big bulk of it is, it's a culture, you know. It's not, look, I have a friend who's a colleague of mine who says his son is a failure. He's Chinese, okay? Because his son went to University of Texas, Austin, graduate school in computer science, and got a master's degree and not a PhD, okay? My son's a failure. He didn't get a PhD, okay? It's a cultural thing. How do we we accept that essentially, look, she's 17 years old, she's getting married, she's going to have a baby. How wonderful, okay? So there's a cultural issue there in accepting the dropout of high school at a rate above what it should be accepted, okay? And we have to deal with that. We have to deal with the parents and say, look, your child is really talented and there's a great future for them, not to just drop out. But if their cousins are dropping out and their friends are dropping out, and it's part of being a culture, a subculture of a city culture, okay, and stuff. So there's a lot of things that people say, and here's 2 of them that I don't buy. They need the money, so at the bachelor's degree level, they go to work instead of going to graduate education. There's some truth in that, and also the fact that what you just said, it's the family issues, okay? I think it's overused. I think it's overused. There's some of it to it, but that's not the critical issue. That's not the critical issue. Mathematics. If I go on the corner of Houston, Texas, and I find a corner, and I find this group of Hispanic males, and I say, would you like to be a mathematician? They'll go, why? We're normal. We're good human beings. I mean, there's nothing wrong with us, okay? I mean, why would I ever want to be a mathematician or a scientist? I mean, that's something really weird, okay? So when I talk to high schools, my whole objective with these cards, and I have other cards, and I give talks on this to show that I'm reasonably normal, okay? That's it. So I think that is an issue, but it is lame to let it explain the whole situation. You have to want it. You have to want it, okay? My mother conditioned us that there would never be a thought of dropping out of high school, see? So anyway, that's it.
We have time for one more question.
The one question.
The big question. Yes, right here.
Me?
Yeah,
Hi. My name is Lovely.
you're lovely.
Thank you. Your presentation spoke to me a lot. Here at the university, I work with the admissions office, and my title is Adele as a diversity enrichment leader. And I feel in the past 2 years or so, the University of Delaware has tried a lot with to increase diversity. And with this being a PWI, do you see can you see the PWI changing to a more diverse campus like Rutgers, or something where support programs actually support the minorities that are here and the ones that are coming in who are less prepared?
Yes, I think any university that wants to do something can do it, okay? See, look, when Rice wanted to go with high minority enrollment, They had to give up this status of being blue chip, i.e. we have the highest SAT average of the freshman class of all the schools in the country. We had to drop that because the minorities didn't come in with the SAT average that you could brag about saying we're with Princeton and MIT, et cetera. And we did. And all of a sudden, this year we had the record number of African Americans in the freshman class. If it can be done, sure. It's just leadership. It's leadership, okay? That's what I've been finding at Rice all these years. Sure, it can be done. But you have to say, okay, we value it, we want to do it, and we're going to do it in a way that it will succeed, okay? And that's what we have to do. So we have these special programs. Sure, it can be done. Anybody who wants to do it can do it. But they just have to say, we make commitments to it, we value it, and we support it in the way it has to be supported. It can be done. Not everybody has to do the same things. It doesn't bother me if schools don't make commitments to it, but I want the schools that do make commitments to bringing in the students, making sure that they succeed. So when I go visit graduate schools, or even undergraduate schools, I ask them, I don't want to know the percentage you accepted. I want to know what percentage of those you accepted actually graduated.
Thank you very much.